6-month, 1-year, and 2-year rentals are popular choices, but month-to-month arrangements are also an option. This gives you and your tenant flexibility. However, it's important to remember that implementing this kind of lease has drawbacks. In this video, we'll provide all the information you need to decide whether this kind of arrangement is best for you. We'll also provide information on what to include and how to draw up a month-to-month lease agreement. A month-to-month lease, which is often referred to as tenancy at will, is a type of lease that allows the landlord to evict a tenant at any time during the required period. The contract will automatically be renewed at the end of every month unless one party gives the other written notice of cancellation via certified mail within the boundaries of state law. When it comes to moving in, evicting a tenant from the landlord's property, and abiding by local legislation, a month-to-month rental agreement is similar to a standard lease. The sole distinction is that either the landlord or the tenant may terminate the contract at any time by delivering a notice to quit, otherwise known as a lease termination letter. The state termination period, which is typically 30 days, determines how much notice is needed. However, as long as it is longer than the minimum required by the state where the property is located, both parties may consent to any termination notice period. Let's look at the process of establishing a month-to-month rental agreement. The first step is to show potential tenants the property. They can inspect the amenities, fixtures, facilities, and more to determine whether or not it's suitable for them. If they are still interested, this is a good time to get them to fill out a rental application form. Next, you'll need to screen all candidates before choosing one. You'll need to look at their income, credit report, criminal history, and past evictions. Now, just as a disclaimer, I work at DoorLoop, and this video was produced by DoorLoop. You can use DoorLoop to do all your tenant screening on one intuitive platform. Book a free demo today to try it out for yourself. The third step, when deciding whether to lease the property to the candidate, the landlord can take precautions against people with poor credit or no rental history by raising the security deposit amount, requesting advance rent, or insisting the tenant pay by automated clearinghouse or ACH. After receiving approval, the landlord can proceed to the following state and start the lease negotiation. If the applicant is rejected, the landlord must provide him or her with a letter of rejection outlining the grounds for the denial of tenancy. The fourth step is to draw up a rental agreement. You can download DoorLoop's free forms or use our custom property management software to generate a month-to-month rental agreement. Month-to-month lease agreements usually stipulate the tenant's responsibilities, termination period, rental amount, security deposits, and more. To download our free rental agreement forms, click on the link in the description below. The fifth step is to execute the lease. Make sure both parties sign the lease. You'll also need to get a witness to sign the agreement. Once that's done, your tenant must pay the security deposit and first month's rent before moving in. Now, here's the question. Is this type of rental agreement the right choice? A month-to-month lease could be applicable in a variety of circumstances. Some long-term agreements have a month-to-month option that becomes available once the initial contract expires. This generally applies when a renter decides not to sign a new contract but has no urgent plans to vacate the rental property. The terms of the current lease usually specify how the month-to-month agreement will operate, including whether the renter will be expected to pay more rent than what was specified in the initial lease. The conditions of a month-to-month lease could also be affected by local law. In other situations, a landlord may choose to impose a month-to-month lease because of the neighborhood's high rental potential, operate the home as a vacation rental, or do so to suit the student population. While landlords must choose the most suitable method for them, there are some general benefits and drawbacks to consider. Perhaps the greatest advantage of a month-to-month rental is the flexibility it offers. Due to the lack of a long-term lease, landlords have more freedom to decide how to use the rental property and how to modify the rental agreement, typically with proper notice. A shorter lease enables landlords to maintain competitive prices with those in the area or neighborhood in prime locations where rental prices are rising quickly and tenants are in high supply. Compared to a long-term lease, a month-to-month lease makes it significantly easier for landlords leasing their primary residence to return home. Some property owners may desire the flexibility of renting a vacant unit as an executive rental or holiday home. Another major benefit of implementing a month-to-month rental agreement is the potential to make more money. One of the most significant benefits of adopting month-to-month leasing agreements is greater earning potential. Short-term leases allow you to raise your monthly rent prices. This is because these short-term leases put the landlord at greater risk, since renters are free to leave at any point with adequate notice. Month-to-month leases also offer a quicker way to get rid of a renter who pays late or doesn't respect the property. With just a few days' notice, you can remove a tenant. Long-term leases, on the other hand, require a greater notice period before a tenant can be removed. Many landlords start with a month-to-month rental agreement to determine whether a particular tenant is suitable for a long-term lease. Although the tenant screening process, which involves analyzing a candidate's credit report, past evictions, and criminal background, is helpful, you may later find that the renter is irresponsible or pays their monthly rent late. When you start the tenancy on a month-to-month basis, you can see whether the tenant really is a good fit. Although a month-to-month rental agreement may offer many benefits, it does have a few drawbacks that may make it less appealing. There is uncertainty because a month-to-month rental agreement means the landlord could be 30 days away from an empty property. Since tenants aren't tied down to a long-term contract, they are free to leave whenever they want, provided they give proper notice. That might make it more difficult for a landlord to make long-term plans on both a personal and professional level. We recommend opting for long-term rental agreements during stressful times to avoid this becoming yet another source of stress. Another drawback is that a vacant property results in lost revenue. In a rental market with lower occupancy, the possibly significant turnover associated with short rental contracts may pose problems since new renters would not be available, and a vacant unit would result in a loss of rental income. To add to this, seasonal variations in rental rates might occur in some places. The demand varies throughout the year depending on certain circumstances. It's particularly important to follow the market, or you may have to settle for a lower income. On another note, it can be costly to change tenants. Rental units must be cleaned at the absolute least. Depending on how the previous occupants left the place, they might also need a coat of paint, new flooring, or even significant repairs. Additionally, it takes money and time to promote and fill a vacancy. There's also the expense of doing tenant screenings, possibly on a yearly basis. Now, if you've never had to draw up a short-term rental contract before, the good news is this type of agreement is the same as a long-term lease. However, the lease term is shorter. Some of the things you'll need to include in this type of rental contract include the rental property address and the unit number, names and contact details of both the landlord and tenant, the start date and end date of the contract, monthly rent amount when lease payments are due and any prepaid rent due, an additional pet fee if applicable, late fee provision, additional parking fees, security deposit amount, requirements for insurance, the notice period for the termination of the contract by either the landlord or tenant, provision for the automatic renewal after 1 month, security deposit deductions according to landlord-tenant laws, utilities, repairs, and other responsibilities, disclosures such as the lead-based paint disclosure required by federal law, and months or days notice required to terminate the lease. Now, let's switch gears and talk about ending month-to-month rental agreements. The process for terminating contracts valid for less than a year is pretty straightforward. It's important to consult the lease before ending a rental agreement. Keep in mind that both the landlord and tenant have the right to terminate the lease. It usually takes 30 days to modify a lease term, such as increasing the rent or canceling the agreement, although this might differ based on the state where the rental unit is located. Landlords typically request 30 days notice to terminate month-to-month leases. Keep in mind that some exceptions do apply. Certain states have lower notice period requirements, such as Connecticut with a 3-day notice period. Others impose a much longer notice period provision, like the District of Columbia's 120-day notice provision, depending on the reason for the month-to-month lease's termination. Depending on the state, a termination letter for a month-to-month lease may be sent personally or by certified mail. The termination notice may need to be given before the start of the subsequent monthly contract term in certain states. For example, to prevent the lease from automatically renewing for March, notice should be provided if the lease expires on the final day of February. And the termination period varies from one state to another. For example, Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, and Arkansas all require 30 days notice, but Louisiana only requires 10 days notice. For more information on termination notice requirements in each state, click on the link in the description below. Although month-to-month leases give the landlord and tenant a lot of flexibility, there are a few things to think about before deciding to go for this type of rental agreement. The potential for increased revenue and other benefits should be weighed against the danger that a rental unit might go unoccupied for an extended period of time or interfere with personal plans. And the most important considerations when choosing between long-term contracts and month-to-month rental agreements should be market conditions and personal preference concerning financial security. If you need help drafting a lease agreement or termination letter, click on the link in the description below. And here are some frequently asked questions. Number 1 is, can a landlord request a security deposit for a month-to-month rental agreement? The answer is yes. Landlords are allowed to collect a security deposit for month-to-month tenancies. It's important to check local security deposit laws to ensure that you're compliant. Number 2 is, do month-to-month rental agreements have to be notarized? The answer is no. These contracts do not have to be notarized unless the monthly rent is expensive. Number 3 is, what disclosures do I need to include in my rental agreement? Disclosures will differ from one state to another, so it's best to check local laws. However, all rental agreements must have a lead-based paint disclosure if the property was built before 1978 and potentially poses a lead exposure risk. Well, that's it for this video. If you want more real estate content for your business, make sure you check out our YouTube channel for more DoorLoop videos, such as the best property management apps all managers need and the top apartment listing sites for your rentals. Remember to like this video, share it, and of course, subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching. See you next time.